15 years ago, if I'd be interested in buying a pair of cargo shorts, I would have said something awful like, maybe if I were an old man who has lost his fashion sense and his will to live. That was before my call to ministry. But guess what I wear these days? Cargo shorts. Not only do I wear them, I use all the pockets. They're handy. And another fashion surprise is when the weather gets cool, I'll put socks on with my sandals. And I don't care. I don't know how this happened to me. Because I know what I used to think 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I've swore at one time, maybe even on a Bible before my call to ministry, that I would never wear cargo shorts or certainly not socks with sandals. But here we are. Something sneaky happened along the way. Maybe it was a fashion conspiracy. Maybe we do just give up on being fashionable as we get older. Maybe it's a gentle, unwitting acquiescence to a dominant narrative of what a middle-aged man is supposed to look like in North America. Today is July 4. The fact that it's on a Sunday and a time when we're debating teaching historical facts versus teaching revisionist history makes the day a little more complicated than usual for many of us. More complicated even still because it seems many waving American flags, mounting them to their cars, are the ones who want to lie about our past. Complicated because those kneeling in front of the flags in protest are the ones calling for truth and justice. And how did we get here? Here being a place that claims out of one side of its mouth to be a beacon of democracy, while many actively work to suppress votes and overturn legitimate election results. Here being a place where accountability for the murder of a black, brown, or indigenous person and the rape of women as a rule go unpunished. And when convictions of perpetrators do happen, in the rare event they do happen, sometimes those convictions do not stand because of a technicality. And we wonder why black, brown, and indigenous folks have little faith, little hope. And we wonder why women rarely accuse their abusers. But it's July 4. Shouldn't we just set aside our differences and celebrate America, the land of the free and the home of the brave? Shouldn't we gently acquiesce to the narrative that keeps clinging to dominance? Now, the tug to ignore certain things, even some awful things, is a strong tug for some of us. But how and why we memorialize, how and why we celebrate are indicators of our values. It's July 4. If we block out injustice, if we block out the raging debate on whether to teach actual history or revisionist fantasy, if we simply choose to be in denial about what these things are and just celebrate as one nation under God, what does that say about us? On the flip side, it's July 4. If we bring into the day conversations about systemic injustice, if we discuss the merits of facts, if we choose to be clear-eyed and sober about the not too glamorous state of things, this too says something about us. So later this afternoon, I'll be in my cargo shorts and sandals, no socks because it's still too hot. And I will be thinking more on these questions. Now, this afternoon for me will be particularly complicated because As an immigrant and a naturalized citizen to the United States, in my family history and folklore, I grew up idolizing a version of America. And I mean idolizing. Part of the idolatry was a belief that we could be a part of it, that through education and hard work that we and anyone could earn their way into the American dream. American idolatry was so real in my life that although English is my third language, my first being Tamil, my mother's native tongue, the second being Telugu, my father's native tongue, and as my mother tells it, I was fluent in both by the age of 2 and could have full conversations and tell stories in both languages. Although English is my third language, I am often met with words like, "You have no accent." You see, losing the accent, losing the distinctive hand gestures and head nods, were conscious sacrifices made to the American idol. The American dream comes at a cost. English is my third language, and I am illiterate in my first 2. I have not been fluent in spoken Tamil or Telugu for decades. Oftentimes, the best I can do is understand what people are saying to me, and thanks to India being the country with the second largest English-speaking population, ahead of Great Britain and just behind the United States, people can talk to me in Tamil and Telugu, and I can respond in English, and we can have a 2-language conversation. After my family immigrated from India, along with many of our cousins and extended family, my parents and some of the other parents made a group decision, because we were in community together, made a group decision to be English only at home and outside the home. To let our native languages go so that me and my cousins could free up our developing language-acquiring minds to the mastery of English, to sound like we belong. Because, you see, we could never look like we belonged, but we could speak, write, and dress like we belonged. And we were good worshipers of the American idol. In addition to language, we sacrificed music, festivals, rituals, folktales, reverence for our ancestors. We sacrificed our sense of justice by pretending we did not see injustice to avoid calling attention to ourselves. And we carried the burden of shame around our cultural identities. We sacrificed to the American idol. But we also know the American idol rewarded us for those sacrifices. Me and my brother, all of our cousins, we are educated. We are financially secure. Almost every single one of us owns 1 or more properties. And we are from people that are low caste. Low caste. We are generational field workers. So this is a remarkable shift within a single generation. But now, and only now, because me and my cousins have attained a fair amount of privilege, and because we feel like we belong just enough, we've begun unpacking how we got here and what it cost us. We've begun to reconnect to our roots, our ancestral stories, our aesthetic, our native gods and goddesses. And when stepping back a little bit to examine how and why does this all work, how did this happen? I learned in my study of womanist theology the phrase, the fantastic hegemonic imagination, and came to understand that American Idol is a primary tool of this device. See, Emily Towns, who wrote the book Womanist Ethics and the cultural production of evil. She coins the phrase fantastic hegemonic imagination. Hegemony is defined as leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others. And I want to share with you the abstract of Townes' book in order to shed some light and flesh out what is meant by fantastic hegemonic imagination. Quote, rather than content ourselves with the belief that the fantastic hegemonic imagination, the motive force behind the cultural production of evil, is a force that sits outside of us, we must answer remembering that we are in a world that we have helped make. The fantastic hegemonic imagination is deep within us, and none of us can escape its influence by simply wishing to do so or thinking that our ontological perch exempts us from its spuming oppressive hierarchies. These hierarchies of age, class, gender, sexual orientation, race, and on are held in place by violence, fear, ignorance, and acquiescence. The end game is to win and win it all. Status, influence, place, creation. End quote. That's a lot. Now, the fantastic hegemonic imagination is a subtle, persistent, and terribly powerful force that pulls us in as supporters of the systems that prop up and preserve the status quo. The very status quo we liberals will march against, sign petitions to undo, attack on social media. But the last line of the abstract, the end game is to win and win it all. Status, influence, place, creation. That is the very pedestal of the American idol. When you worship at the feet of this edifice, make sacrifices to it, you already know the end game. You already know deep down that you've been consumed. Here we are. As Americans, people who live in this country, as inheritors of Western Christianity, we must admit that it is not only our national identity, but the very foundations of Christianity in America, that this is where we have, at minimum, tolerated and more likely have embraced the notion that the end game is to win, and to win it all. Manifest destiny, slavery, indentured servitude, sharecropping, unjust labor laws, poverty wages. All these things have made possible the lives that many of us enjoy. Heaven help us all. We must answer, remembering that we are in a world that we have helped make. The Gospel according to Luke. So I say to you, ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is it possible that we have been so completely infiltrated by fantastic hegemonic imagination that we have in fact been getting precisely what we've been asking for? Precisely what we've been praying for. So completely infiltrated that maybe we think we're praying for fish and for eggs, and instead we're getting snakes and scorpions by accident, but maybe we're praying for the snakes and the scorpions in the first place. And if this has indeed been our unwitting, subconscious desire, we best stop running around claiming we prayed for fish and eggs. Examine ourselves. We better check ourselves before we completely wreck ourselves. And as I think about it, in my reflection time, I wondered, has the idea that if I study hard, work hard, that I will be materially rewarded at a stable level of comfort and security, and ideally, maybe with a bit of luck, could be rewarded like Jeff Bezos? You see, if the idea of I could be filthy rich too someday is more central to what I have internalized than all my neighbors deserve to be sheltered, fed, educated, and healthy, then I'm getting exactly what I've been praying for. See, if our fear of an enemy like China or Russia or made-up enemies all over the place for whatever reason through our own internal propaganda, if we've internalized this fear of other to the point that we have militarized our police and spent an incredibly ungodly amount on our military, what are we asking for? What are we praying for? So we progressives and we liberals, this is me, we take some great comfort in pointing fingers. We savor our righteous anger. We are on high alert for the next offensive thing someone might say or do. But what are we really deep down asking for? What are we really deep down praying for? See, our folklore, our spirituality, our identity, our pleas, and our prayers have been hijacked. So, my Christian siblings, sisters and brothers, on this July 4, our job in this worship series of Christian Folx and Folklore, and our job beyond this summer, we must liberate our stories from the grasp of Christian nationalism, liberate our minds from cultural and economic supremacy, liberate our pleas and prayers from implicit, unconscious support of the status quo. Back to Brother Luke. So I say to you, ask and it will be given you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds. Dear sisters, brothers, and siblings, what are you asking for? What are you praying for? Amen.